Okay, so this is just going to be a weird format where I'm going to basically take the giant video that I made on how to get better at Hearthstone and break it down into a lot of other shorter videos so it's easier to digest for you guys. Because I know having a 25, 30-minute video on every single tip can be a little bit overwhelming. So I'm just going to go over them 1 to 2 at a time and go in a little more depth on why they are good. So I think the first one, although it is cheesy and something people say a lot, is definitely still something that you need to pay attention to, and that is only playing 1 or 2 decks. When people say this, they genuinely mean it. Like, you shouldn't always be looking to try a ton of decks. If you genuinely want to climb and get better, you might think that getting better means playing a lot of decks and understanding them. That's not the case all the time. In order to get better, and this is the same case for a game like League of Legends, right? When people one-trick a champion and become good at that one champion, and then you may think that they're, like, bad at other ones, but they're really not because they have a general understanding of the game. For example, Yasuo in League of Legends. I watched his stream. He was the first one that came to mind. He's kind of what I thought about. The reason why he got to where he is, and he's been challenger most seasons, and I know I'm talking about another game, but I'll wrap this back, is because he played that champion Yasuo at a high level and was able to play him so, like, mindlessly on autopilot that he was able to focus on other things of the game. So it's kind of the same thing with Hearthstone. Obviously, it's not as difficult, but the same concepts still apply. If I'm playing, say, Face Hunter, right, and I'll just show you my deck real quick, I guess. If I'm playing Face Hunter and I'm like, okay, I have the coin, most likely I want to save the Face Stalker till turn 3, and then Face Stalker coin hero power. If I already have plans on what I want to do in my head because I know how the deck runs, I can focus on what the opponent does more and react to it accordingly. I also know what cards are best into certain situations, like, oh, into this matchup, like Demon Hunter, Explosive Trap becomes really, really, really good at dealing with a lot of the 2 health minions, so I sometimes want to keep that. Into some matchups, you need to know when to use your removal to deal damage to face. And sometimes, again, into aggro matchups like Hunter or Demon Hunter, you're going to have to use Arcane Shot and Rapid Fire, sometimes comboed with Thalnos, to hit minions, that way you do not die. Also, if you understand one specific deck, you can locate weaknesses in the deck and change it accordingly. Like, I don't know if you realize, but this is the same deck that I had that literally ran all of the Death Rattles, right? That ran Terran back in the day, along with the Porcupine and the Lions. But over time, I realized what was good and what wasn't, and I've adjusted that one specific deck accordingly so that way it fits the meta better. And that's another thing that you can do by only playing 1 to 2 decks, is you can adjust it to fit the meta better so that way your deck doesn't always, like, your deck won't go out of the meta. There is an argument to be made to play a second deck, that way you have like a tempo-y aggro deck and maybe a control deck, so that way if the meta does shift, you're not entirely screwed. So that's actually something that I would maybe recommend if you want to play more than 1 deck, but just know that if you do, it's also a little bit more expensive. There are a lot of reasons why playing 1 deck is extremely, extremely good. Those are probably the biggest ones, and these are issues, these are points that I can bring up with Face Hunter, which people think are some of the most brain-dead decks in the game. But no, once you get to a level of mastery with this deck where you can play it on autopilot, you can start focusing on when to use Arcane Shot and Rapid Fire for removal, and when to keep Explosive Trap, even though most of the time you want to get rid of it, and when to keep certain cards. Like Unleash the Hounds is also good against Tempo Demon Hunter, and also against Rogue low-key, because they play so many little lackeys, and they can't deal with wide boards very well, and they'll have to trade in a ton. Like, all of these little things come together and make something great. If you want to play more complex deck like Galakrond Rogue, you're like, okay, I can draw for the Morag Artificer for the Nether Breath combo, but if I am greedy and I know that I'm playing against a deck that won't burst me, I can get greedy and save myself, so maybe I can get 2 Artificers, so Nether Breath will do 16 damage. You'll know when to play Veiled Worshipper, you'll know when to life tap and not life tap because of how low on health you are, and that's actually one of the big things about Warlock in general. You'll learn when to eat your demon and when not to, like, do I need to kill it now or do I not need to? And playing it with Plague of Flames, because if they only have 3 minions on the board, you summon 4 and one's a demon, you can eat one of those 1/1 demons, heal 5 before you play Plague of Flames, and essentially lose nothing. Like, there are a lot of little things in the deck, along with, like, should I life tap a little bit more to prep for a Dark Skies, even though I'll take more damage now? Keeping track of hand size for Twilight Drake and not overdrawing. When to play Galakron. When to play around your win condition of Alexstrasza to burst them. Like, a lot of different things go into the deck that you need to learn. And if you play a ton of different decks, your mind will be full of a ton of different information, and it won't help you actually climb. So that is why playing one deck is extremely good. And not only that, but this is another deck that I've played a decent amount that I've been slowly changing. Like, I didn't play the Abyssal Summoner before. I used to play, what's it called? The Unstable Fellbolt. But over time, I've realized that with all of the aggro deck nerfs, this deck is actually better with this, because the meta's slowing down. So having other things that generate big minions could be pretty decent if you can create more big demons yourself. So I took out the Unstable Fellbolt and put in an Abyssal Summoner. And I'm just like, okay, I already do okay in aggro decks because I have a lot of healing and removal. I make my deck a little bit worse into them, which are going out of the meta slightly, and putting in a deck or a card that will be better into where I think the meta is going to go. The next thing, and this is just in combination with playing 1 or 2 decks, is net decking, right? You can use Hearthstone Replay to teach you like what decks are good and what not. Obviously, I've paid for it, so I'm giving you some insider information. I don't actually know if this is like illegal or anything, but hopefully it's not. Hopefully they don't like come after me. The point is, you can look at a site like Hearthstone Replay and figure out what decks are good, right? But you also need to pay attention to the fact that this is just bronze through gold. You can look at other different levels of play. I like saying diamond through legend because that's generally higher level of play, but like still broad enough to where it can apply to a lot of people. And you can look like, okay, Highlander Hunter's still number 1. This is a deck that I might want to choose to win. But another thing that you can do is if you see that some of these decks are super high win rate, like, okay, Highlander Hunter, Tempo Demon Hunter, Murloc Paladin. 3 of the top 4 decks are fairly aggressive with minion-based like damage. Highlander Hunter not so much because you have the weapon and hero power, but at least Demon Hunter and Murloc Paladin rely a lot on board presence to kill you, along with Highlander Hunters to some extent, although Bran kind of defeats the purpose of that along with Zephyrus and Alexstrasza, but at least 2 of them rely on minions. So you're like, okay, in my deck, I shall run some extra removal. Or you're like, okay, Highlander Hunter, Demon Hunter, Murloc Paladin, and Pirate Warrior, some of the highest win rate decks in the game, which means that in my build, it might be worth it to run an Acidic Swamp Ooze. So since I teched in the Abyssal Summoner, like maybe I realize I don't necessarily want the Abyssal Summoner, I can run an Acidic Swamp Ooze because that might do better in the meta with the decks that are actually doing well right now. And I know that I'm just trying to counter the meta, and it goes into keeping track of the statistics, right? And then another thing that you can do is just straight net deck and then go from there. That's something that I do a lot. I go to view most popular deck. I look at their deck, see like, okay, I like this, but if there are cards I don't like, I think about why I don't like them and change them around. Obviously, if I don't have some of the cards, like some of you are on a budget and you need to take out legendaries, that's a different issue altogether. That's more of a money issue. But from a more skill standpoint, if you're looking and you're like, I don't think Faceless Corruptor fits well in the deck, right? Because a lot of my minions are pretty big. It has a couple of combos with, say, like the Desert Spear or something. But I personally think that a better card in the deck would be an Evasive Worm. And that's what I put in. I put an Evasive Worm to have more consistent dragon synergy with something like Rottenest Drake, Corrosive Breath, and Scale Rider. It fulfills a similar role to the Faceless Corruptor, and even though the Transform is really, really good, a lot of my minions don't really capitalize on that, so I get to play the Evasive Worm, right? So, obviously, you can say that, maybe it's better or worse to run this, but using the net deck, I change the deck in a way that I think personally would be better, and that's something that you guys can do too over time. Like, that comes with a mix of playing Highlander Hunter a lot, as well as knowing what's in the meta, and looking at what other people are playing and using all of that information to perfect my one deck. And that's probably one of the most important things in order to actually climb in Hearthstone. You want to play 1 to 2 decks, and then you want to base that deck on a net deck as just, a base, and then change it as you go as the meta changes, and then also look at what's good in the meta and be like, okay, what do all of these things have in common? Even Rogue to some extent. Weapons, 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 weapons. Therefore, it would be good to run something that deals with weapons. And like in my Highlander, I now have Frozen Shadow Weaver to freeze their face and Acidic Swamp Ooze because so many people have weapons. Galacron Warlock, I actually haven't made that change because I have a lot of healing in my deck. But you know what? Now thinking about it out loud, I think I'm going to play the Acidic Swamp Ooze and see how that goes for a little bit, because I already am 11-5 with this deck, I think. But I can always try to make the deck a little bit better. I'll play some games with it, with this card in it, and we'll see how it goes. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys enjoy this sort of format, please let me know. I will be more than happy to do these more educational things in the future. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed and learned a thing or two. See ya.